What if everything we thought we knew about Kiara and Kovu's love story was a lie? What if their entire relationship was built on royal espionage, manipulation, and a carefully orchestrated plan that would make even the most seasoned intelligence operative proud? The Lion King 2 presents us with what appears to be a simple tale of forbidden love conquering all barriers. But when you examine the evidence with a critical eye, a far more sinister picture emerges. Simba didn't just stumble into resolving the outsider crisis through his daughter's romance. He engineered it from the very beginning. The first red flag appears in the opening moments of Kiara's story. Simba, the same king who obsessively protected his daughter throughout her cubhood, suddenly decides to let her go on her first hunt completely alone. This is the same lion who assigned Timon and Pumbaa as secret bodyguards for a simple walk outside Pride Rock. Yet somehow, for the most dangerous milestone in a young lion's life, he just lets her go. The official narrative suggests Simba finally realized he needed to give Kiara space to grow. But this explanation crumbles under scrutiny. Simba had spent years being overprotective precisely because he understood the threats surrounding the Pride Lands. He knew about the outsiders. He knew about Zira's hatred. He knew about Scar's chosen heir growing up in the Outlands, training to eliminate the royal family. So why would a strategic mind like Simba suddenly abandon all caution at the most crucial moment? The answer becomes clear when you examine his behavior leading up to the hunt. Watch Simba's body language during their conversation. There's no anxiety, no reluctance, no last-minute warnings about staying close to home. Instead, there's something that looks suspiciously like anticipation. He's not worried about what might happen to Kiara. He's waiting for something specific to unfold. Consider the timing. Kiara's first hunt happens to coincide perfectly with increased outsider activity near the borders. Intelligence reports would have told Simba that Zira's pride was becoming more aggressive, more desperate. Food shortages in the Outlands were pushing them closer to Pride Rock territory. Any competent ruler would know that contact between the two groups was becoming inevitable. But here's where Simba's true genius reveals itself. Instead of waiting for the outsiders to make the first move, he created the conditions for a controlled first contact. By sending Kiara out alone, he wasn't abandoning his daughter to fate. He was positioning his most valuable asset exactly where she needed to be. The intelligence network that made this possible had been operating in plain sight for years. Zazu's daily reports weren't just ceremonial updates about weather and herd movements. They were comprehensive intelligence briefings covering every movement in and around the Pride Lands. The Hornbill's ability to cover vast distances undetected made him the perfect reconnaissance asset. Then there's Rafiki, whose mystical reputation provided perfect cover for his real role as information broker. His frequent journeys throughout the region, his connections with animals from every corner of Africa, his ability to appear anywhere at any time, these weren't magical abilities. They were the tools of a master spy whose spiritual authority gave him access to information networks no ordinary lion could maintain. Even Timon and Pumbaa, seemingly bumbling comic relief, served a crucial intelligence function. Their reputation as harmless outcasts allowed them to move freely through territories where royal lions would be immediately detected. Their network of fellow outcasts and forgotten creatures provided eyes and ears in places the official royal scouts could never reach. This intelligence apparatus would have given Simba detailed knowledge of outsider movements, capabilities, and most importantly, their plans. He would have known about Kovu's training. He would have known about Zira's desire for revenge. He would have known that sooner or later the outsiders would attempt some form of infiltration or attack. The question wasn't whether contact would happen, but how to ensure it happened on Simba's terms. The key insight is understanding Simba's strategic thinking. Direct military confrontation with the outsiders would be costly and potentially devastating. Even if the Pridelanders won, the victory would come at enormous cost in lives and resources. Worse, it would leave the underlying grievances unresolved, creating conditions for future conflicts. But what if there was another way? What if the conflict could be resolved not through force, but through conversion? What if the outsiders could be brought into the Pride Lands willingly, their anger transformed into loyalty? For such a plan to work, Simba would need an agent capable of gaining the complete trust of the enemy leadership. Someone young enough to be seen as non-threatening, royal enough to carry real authority, and skilled enough to navigate the psychological complexities of deep cover work. Someone exactly like his daughter. The more you examine Simba's decision to let Kiara hunt alone, the more deliberate it becomes. This wasn't a father learning to let go. This was a master strategist deploying his most effective weapon in a conflict that would determine the future of the Pride Lands. The hunt was never about catching prey, it was about making contact with the enemy. But here's where it gets really suspicious. The crocodile attack that brings Kiara and Kovu together isn't just convenient. It's impossibly perfect. When you break down this chance encounter frame by frame, the evidence of orchestration becomes overwhelming. First, consider the location. Kiara doesn't just wander randomly into outsider territory. She heads directly toward the exact border region where Kovu happens to be hunting. For a lioness on her first solo expedition, this navigation is remarkably precise. She bypasses dozens of suitable hunting grounds closer to home, instead traveling to the one spot where contact with an outsider is virtually guaranteed. The official story suggests Kiara simply got carried away chasing prey and lost track of her location. But watch her movements carefully. There's no frantic searching, no confusion about direction. She moves with purpose toward a specific destination, as if following a predetermined route. Then there's the timing of the crocodile encounter itself. Kiara approaches the water during peak crocodile feeding time, when the reptiles are most active and aggressive. Any experienced hunter would know to avoid water sources during these hours. Yet Kiara, supposedly educated by the finest hunting instructors in the Pride Lands, walks directly into this obvious trap. The crocodile's behavior raises even more questions. Instead of attempting to drag their prey underwater immediately, standard crocodile hunting strategy, they engage in an extended chase sequence that keeps Kiara visible and creates maximum dramatic tension. It's almost as if they're following a script designed to maximize the impact of Kovu's eventual rescue. And then Kovu appears at exactly the right moment. Not too early to prevent danger, not too late to avoid genuine peril. His timing is so precise it suggests he was already in position, waiting for the predetermined signal to intervene. But the most damning evidence comes from Kovu's rescue technique itself. This isn't the improvised response of a young lion stumbling upon an emergency. His movements show training, coordination, familiarity with the terrain. He knows exactly where to position himself, exactly how to approach the crocodiles, exactly how to create an escape route. This level of tactical sophistication doesn't develop overnight. More telling still is what happens immediately after the rescue. Instead of the natural wariness you'd expect between lions from hostile prides, Kiara and Kovu fall into easy conversation. There's no fear, no suspicion, no caution. They interact like actors who've rehearsed their scene multiple times. The conversation itself follows a predictable pattern designed to build trust and establish emotional connection. Kiara plays the rebellious princess, frustrated by overprotective parents. Kovu responds as the understanding outsider who knows what it's like to live under suffocating expectations. Each revelation is perfectly calculated to create sympathy and common ground. Even their playful interaction has strategic undertones. The fun and games aren't just bonding activities. They're intelligence-gathering operations disguised as innocent play. Each shared experience provides opportunities to assess capabilities, weaknesses, and psychological profiles. Now consider what Timon and Pumbaa were really doing during this entire sequence. Their sudden appearance when Simba arrives isn't coincidental. They've been monitoring the situation from the beginning, ready to intervene if the operation went wrong, or to provide witness testimony if it went right. Their bumbling comedy routine serves multiple purposes. It diffuses tension, makes the encounter seem less threatening, and provides plausible explanation for how Simba learned about Kiara's adventure so quickly. But underneath the comic relief, they're experienced operatives ensuring their assets' safety during a high-risk mission. Simba's reaction to meeting Kovu reveals the next layer of the operation. Watch his body language carefully. There's surprise, yes, but it's performed surprise. His anger feels calculated rather than genuine. He goes through the motions of protective father, but his eyes are constantly evaluating, processing, planning. Most revealing is how quickly Simba agrees to let Kovu stay in the Pride Lands. For a king who spent years obsessing over his daughter's safety, this decision comes suspiciously easily. He barely questions Kovu's story, doesn't demand proof of good intentions, doesn't consult with his advisors. Within minutes of meeting Scar's chosen heir, he's inviting him into the heart of the royal territory. This isn't the behavior of a trusting father. This is the calculated move of a strategist who's achieved exactly what he planned. The sleeping arrangements provide another clue. Kovu isn't housed with other young lions or given quarters appropriate for a guest. Instead, he's positioned in areas that provide maximum access to royal family members while maintaining the appearance of casual hospitality. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of bonding happens under conditions that favor intelligence gathering. Kiara's role during this phase becomes even more suspicious under scrutiny. She doesn't just befriend Kovu, she systematically breaks down his psychological defenses. Her rebellion against royal protocol gives Kovu someone to relate to. Her curiosity about outsider life provides openings for him to reveal crucial information. Her gradual warming toward him creates emotional investment that makes betrayal increasingly difficult. Each activity they share serves dual purposes. Hunting expeditions map outsider capabilities and techniques. Storytelling sessions reveal cultural values and psychological motivations. Playful competitions assess physical abilities and combat skills. What appears to be innocent romance is actually sophisticated intelligence work. The emotional manipulation is particularly masterful. Kiara presents herself as trapped by royal expectations, desperate for understanding and acceptance. This vulnerability triggers Kovu's protective instincts while encouraging him to share his own struggles and secrets. The psychological bond they form isn't just romantic attraction, it's a carefully cultivated dependence that makes Kovu increasingly willing to prioritize Kiara's needs over his original mission. But perhaps the most damning evidence is the timing of key revelations. Kiara's discoveries about Kovu's true nature always come at moments when they'll have maximum psychological impact. Her surprise at his gentleness, her shock at his capacity for fun, her growing realization that he's nothing like the monster she was taught to expect. These moments feel orchestrated rather than organic. The evidence keeps mounting that this entire romance was a carefully planned operation from the very beginning. But the true scope of Simba's intelligence network runs deeper than anyone realized. To understand how Simba orchestrated Kiara and Kovu's meeting, we need to examine the vast intelligence network that made such precision possible. This wasn't just lucky timing or coincidence. This was the result of years of careful surveillance, information gathering, and strategic planning that reveals the true sophistication of royal operations in the Pride Lands. The foundation of this network starts with Rafiki, whose role extends far beyond spiritual advisor. His reputation as a mystical figure provides perfect cover for what is essentially a continental intelligence operation. Consider his mobility. Rafiki appears in locations across Africa with impossible speed and timing. His explanation of following the wind or listening to the great spirits masks a communication network that spans thousands of miles. His tree isn't just a home, it's a command center. Those paintings covering every surface aren't just artistic expression or historical record. They're intelligence files tracking the movements, relationships, and developments of every significant figure across the region. The seemingly random additions and modifications to these paintings actually represent real-time intelligence updates as new information flows in from his network of sources. The animals that visit Rafiki's tree tell him everything. Birds report troop movements. Elephants share migration patterns that reveal territorial changes. Even insects carry information about food sources, water availability, and environmental conditions that affect political stability. What appears to be casual conversation with forest creatures is actually sophisticated intelligence briefing. Most importantly, Rafiki's spiritual authority grants him access to locations and conversations that would be impossible for any official royal representative. Outsider territories, neutral zones, even hostile regions welcome the wise Mandrel because his religious role transcends political boundaries. This access allows him to gather intelligence directly from source, rather than relying on second-hand reports. But Rafiki's network is just one component of a much larger operation. Zazu's daily reconnaissance flights provide comprehensive surveillance coverage that would make modern intelligence agencies envious. His route isn't random morning exercise, it's a carefully planned intelligence sweep covering every strategic location within hundreds of miles of Pride Rock. The morning report ritual serves as daily intelligence briefing, disguised as ceremonial tradition. When Zazu announces herd movements, weather patterns, or territorial disputes, he's actually providing tactical assessments of factors that could affect regional stability. The seemingly mundane details about which animals are where and doing what create a comprehensive picture of political and economic conditions throughout the Pride Lands and beyond. Zazu's access to other bird networks multiplies his effectiveness exponentially. Migratory species carry information across vast distances. Resident birds provide constant monitoring of specific locations. Predator birds offer aerial reconnaissance of hostile territories. This avian intelligence network creates a real-time communication system that operates faster and more efficiently than any ground-based alternative. The Hornbill's relationship with other royal courts proves particularly valuable. His diplomatic status grants him access to neighboring kingdoms, where he can gather intelligence on regional threats, alliance possibilities, and economic conditions that might affect Pride Land security. These diplomatic missions aren't just ceremonial visits, they're intelligence-gathering expeditions. Then there's the Timon and Pumbaa network, which provides the most valuable intelligence of all: access to outcasts, exiles, and forgotten creatures who see everything but are overlooked by everyone. Their reputation as harmless misfits allows them to move freely through territories where royal agents would be immediately identified and expelled. The outcast community forms a natural intelligence network because they survive by knowing everything that's happening around them. Exiled lions carry information about their former prides. Displaced meerkats know which territories are safe and which are dangerous. Wandering warthogs understand trade routes, water sources, and seasonal patterns that affect regional politics. Most crucially, this network includes lions who've fled from the outlands. These refugees provide direct intelligence about outsider capabilities, leadership dynamics, and strategic planning. Simba would have known about Kovu's training not through magical foresight, but through detailed reports from lions who witnessed it firsthand before escaping Zira's regime. The intelligence picture that emerges from these multiple sources would have given Simba comprehensive knowledge of outsider operations. He would have known about their training methods, their resource limitations, their internal conflicts, and most importantly, their strategic plans. The idea that he was caught off guard by Zira's schemes becomes laughable when you consider the intelligence resources at his disposal. This information would have revealed several crucial facts about the outsider threat. First, their military capabilities were limited by chronic food shortages and internal instability. Despite their fierce reputation, they lacked the resources for sustained conflict against the well-fed, well-organized Pridelanders. Second, their leadership structure centered entirely around Zira's personal authority and obsession with Scar's legacy. Remove or neutralize Zira, and the entire outsider coalition would likely collapse. But direct elimination would create martyrdom and potentially radicalize the next generation of outsiders. Third, the psychological profile of Kovu revealed a young lion caught between competing loyalties. Intelligence reports would have shown his reluctance to fully embrace Zira's hatred, his questions about the righteousness of their cause, his growing doubts about the path he'd been forced to follow. This psychological vulnerability made him an ideal target for conversion. Fourth, the timing of outsider desperation was reaching a critical point. Food shortages were becoming acute, internal pressure was mounting, and Zira was preparing for increasingly desperate actions. Something had to be done soon, or the conflict would escalate beyond control. Armed with this intelligence, Simba faced a strategic choice. He could prepare for war, knowing the Pride Lands would likely win but at enormous cost. He could attempt diplomatic solutions, knowing Zira's hatred made negotiation nearly impossible. Or he could attempt something far more sophisticated, a psychological operation designed to convert the enemy leadership from within. The key insight was recognizing that Zira's greatest weapon, her chosen heir, could also be her greatest vulnerability. Kovu represented the future of outsider resistance, but he also represented the possibility of ending that resistance permanently through conversion rather than confrontation. For this to work, Simba needed an agent capable of gaining Kovu's complete trust and gradually shifting his loyalties. The agent would need to be young enough to seem non-threatening, royal enough to represent a genuine alternative to outsider life, and skilled enough to navigate the complex psychological manipulation required. The intelligence network had already identified the perfect candidate, but implementing this plan would require Simba to make an almost unthinkable sacrifice. Using his own daughter as a deep cover intelligence asset in one of the most dangerous operations in Prideland's history. The question wasn't whether Kiara could handle the mission. The intelligence reports had already established her capabilities, her instincts, and her potential for this kind of work. The question was whether Simba was willing to risk everything on a plan that would require his daughter to deceive, manipulate, and potentially sacrifice her own emotional well-being for the security of the kingdom. The evidence suggests he was not only willing but had been preparing Kiara for exactly this role from the moment she was old enough to understand the stakes involved. But Simba's plan went deeper than anyone realized. The most shocking aspect of this entire operation isn't that Simba used his daughter as an intelligence asset. It's that Kiara knew exactly what she was doing from the very beginning. Every piece of evidence points to the same disturbing conclusion. Kiara wasn't an innocent young lioness who accidentally fell in love with the enemy. She was a trained operative carrying out the most sophisticated psychological manipulation in Prideland's history. Consider her behavior leading up to the first hunt. The rebellion against Simba's overprotection wasn't teenage defiance. It was establishing her cover story. By publicly arguing with her father about independence and royal restrictions, she created the perfect psychological profile for her mission. When Kovu eventually met her, he would see exactly what he was supposed to see. A frustrated princess desperate to escape the suffocating world of royal expectations. But look closer at the specifics of her rebellious statements. Every complaint she voices about royal life happens to align perfectly with outsider grievances against the Prideland's monarchy. Her frustration with privilege, her desire for genuine connection, her rejection of royal superiority, these aren't random teenage angst. They're carefully crafted talking points designed to create maximum psychological resonance with an outsider target. The sophistication becomes even more apparent when you examine her hunting technique during that first expedition. Despite supposedly being on her first solo hunt, Kiara demonstrates tactical awareness that goes far beyond basic training. She knows how to track without being detected, how to approach dangerous terrain, how to assess threats and opportunities with remarkable precision. More tellingly, her mistakes during the crocodile encounter are exactly the kind of calculated risks that create opportunities for rescue without genuine mortal danger. She positions herself close enough to the water to appear vulnerable, but maintains escape routes that could save her life if Kovu failed to appear. This isn't reckless inexperience. It's controlled risk management. Her immediate trust of Kovu after the rescue reveals the most damning evidence of premeditation. Any genuinely surprised lioness would maintain caution around a stranger from a hostile pride. Instead, Kiara immediately begins the bonding process, asking exactly the right questions to build emotional connection while gathering strategic intelligence. Watch how she guides their conversation during that first meeting. She doesn't just make small talk. She systematically probes for information about outsider life, training methods, leadership dynamics, and psychological motivations. Each seemingly innocent question is designed to map Kovu's worldview and identify psychological pressure points for future exploitation. Her playful challenges aren't just fun activities, they're assessment tools. The racing, jumping, and swimming competitions allow her to evaluate Kovu's physical capabilities, competitive instincts, and response to different types of pressure. She's conducting a comprehensive psychological and physical evaluation, disguised as innocent bonding. Most revealing is how perfectly she calibrates her emotional responses to maximize impact on Kovu's psychology. Her surprise at his gentleness comes at exactly the moment when it will create maximum cognitive dissonance with his training. Her vulnerability about royal loneliness surfaces precisely when Kovu is most receptive to seeing her as an ally rather than an enemy. The timing of these emotional revelations isn't coincidental. It follows classic intelligence tradecraft for developing assets. Create initial trust through shared experiences, build emotional investment through calculated vulnerability, then gradually shift the target's loyalties through carefully managed psychological pressure. Her supposed naivety about outsider life is particularly sophisticated misdirection. She asks questions that appear innocent, but actually probe for crucial intelligence about outsider capabilities, resources, and strategic planning. When she expresses curiosity about Kovu's training, she's not making conversation. She's conducting a debriefing on enemy tactical doctrine. The development of their romantic relationship follows textbook asset recruitment protocols. Kiara doesn't just fall in love with Kovu, she systematically makes herself indispensable to his emotional well-being. She becomes his confidant, his source of understanding, his connection to a different way of life. By the time he realizes how deeply he's compromised, extraction from her influence becomes psychologically impossible. Her management of the relationship timeline shows remarkable strategic thinking. She allows their connection to develop just fast enough to build genuine emotional investment, but slowly enough to avoid triggering Kovu's suspicions about manipulation. The pacing creates maximum psychological impact while maintaining plausible deniability about ulterior motives. Even her physical positioning during crucial conversations reveals tactical awareness. She consistently places herself in locations that provide escape routes, visual advantages, and acoustic privacy. These aren't random choices. They're the calculated decisions of someone trained to maintain operational security, even during intimate moments. The information she extracts from Kovu goes far beyond what any civilian would naturally discover. She learns about outsider training methods, leadership hierarchies, resource limitations, and strategic planning. More importantly, she maps the psychological landscape of outsider culture, identifying the fears, hopes, and grievances that drive their behavior. This intelligence gathering serves multiple purposes. It provides Simba with comprehensive insight into enemy capabilities and intentions. It identifies potential leverage points for future psychological operations. Most crucially, it allows Kiara to craft her conversion strategy based on detailed understanding of what motivates Kovu and what undermines his loyalty to Zira. The brilliance of her approach becomes clear when you recognize that she's simultaneously running two different operations. On the surface, she's conducting reconnaissance to assess the outsider threat. But beneath that, she's implementing a sophisticated conversion program designed to turn Scar's chosen heir into a Pride Lands asset. Her rebellion against Simba during the middle phase of their relationship isn't genuine conflict. It's cover maintenance. By appearing to defy her father's wishes about associating with Kovu, she reinforces her credibility as someone genuinely willing to choose love over loyalty. This performance convinces Kovu that her feelings are authentic while providing Simba with plausible deniability about the operation. The most damning evidence comes from her behavior during the climactic confrontation with Zira. Watch her movements during the final battle. She doesn't fight like someone overwhelmed by events. She moves like an operative implementing a predetermined plan. Her positioning, her timing, her tactical decisions all suggest someone following a script rather than improvising responses to chaos. Her famous speech about unity isn't an inspired moment of sudden insight. It's the culmination of months of psychological assessment, delivered at precisely the moment when it would have maximum impact on targets she's spent weeks studying and mapping. Every word is chosen for maximum psychological leverage against specific individuals she's already profiled. The conversion of the outsider lionesses happens too smoothly to be spontaneous. Their sudden willingness to abandon lifelong loyalties suggests that groundwork was laid well in advance. Kiara didn't just convince them in that moment. She'd been preparing them through indirect influence during her entire time with Kovu. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this revelation is what it says about the cost of such operations. Kiara's success required her to suppress her own authentic emotions, manipulate someone who genuinely loved her, and sacrifice any possibility of a relationship built on honest foundations. The final pieces of the puzzle reveal just how far this deception really went. The true scope of Simba's operation becomes clear when you recognize that every major event in The Lion King 2 was choreographed from the beginning. This wasn't just about preventing war with the outsiders. This was about something far more ambitious: the complete psychological conquest of enemy leadership through romantic manipulation. Simba's endgame was never military victory. It was ideological conversion. He understood that defeating the outsiders in battle would solve nothing. Zira's followers would scatter, regroup, and continue their resistance for generations. Their children would grow up seeking revenge. The cycle of violence would continue indefinitely. But what if the outsiders could be convinced to abandon their cause willingly? What if they could be brought into the Pride Lands not as conquered enemies, but as converted allies? What if the next generation of potential rebels could be raised as loyal Pridelanders instead? This required neutralizing not just outsider military capability, but their entire ideological foundation. And the key to that foundation was Kovu himself. As Scar's chosen heir, he represented the future of outsider resistance. His loyalty to Zira's cause was the psychological cornerstone holding the entire movement together. Convert Kovu, and you convert the symbol that gave meaning to outsider struggle. Transform Scar's heir into a Pride Lands loyalist, and you undermine the entire narrative that justified outsider resistance. Make him choose love over revenge, and you prove that Zira's path leads only to isolation and suffering. But achieving this conversion required more than just offering Kovu a better life. His loyalty had to be systematically dismantled through carefully orchestrated psychological pressure. Every belief, every assumption, every emotional attachment that connected him to the outsider cause had to be methodically undermined and replaced. This is where Kiara's true mission becomes clear. She wasn't just gathering intelligence or preventing war. She was implementing the most sophisticated psychological operation in African political history. The complete ideological conversion of enemy leadership through romantic manipulation. The operation required her to become everything Kovu had never experienced but desperately needed. Where Zira offered only hatred and vengeance, Kiara provided love and acceptance. Where outsider life meant constant struggle and deprivation, Prideland's existence offered abundance and security. Where Zira's training emphasized violence and domination, Kiara demonstrated cooperation and mutual respect. But the psychological manipulation went deeper than simple contrast. Kiara had to make Kovu complicit in his own conversion by creating situations where he would voluntarily choose Prideland's values over outsider loyalty. Each decision had to feel like his own choice, not external pressure. The hunting expeditions where she taught him Prideland's techniques weren't just bonding activities. They were retraining sessions, replacing outsider tactical doctrine with Prideland's methodology. By learning new approaches to survival and resource gathering, Kovu was unconsciously adopting the mindset that made those techniques possible. Her stories about Prideland's history and culture weren't entertainment. They were ideological programming, replacing outsider narratives about Prideland's oppression with alternative interpretations that emphasized cooperation, mutual benefit, and inclusive prosperity. Each story subtly undermined a piece of Zira's worldview while offering a more appealing replacement. Most crucially, her demonstrations of trust and vulnerability created emotional investment that made betrayal increasingly difficult. By showing faith in Kovu's character despite his background, she created psychological pressure to live up to that faith. The more trust she showed, the more he felt obligated to deserve it. The brilliance of this approach is that it made Kovu an active participant in his own conversion. Instead of being forced to choose between loyalties, he was gradually led to discover that his original loyalty was based on lies and manipulation. The transition felt like personal growth rather than betrayal. But the operation's true sophistication becomes apparent when you realize how it neutralized every possible avenue of outsider resistance. By converting Kovu, Simba eliminated their future leadership. By demonstrating the possibilities of Prideland's life, he undermined their recruitment narrative. By offering genuine inclusion, he removed the grievances that justified their existence. The final battle wasn't military confrontation. It was the culmination of a psychological operation designed to make military confrontation unnecessary. When Kiara delivered her speech about unity, she wasn't appealing to abstract moral principles. She was activating months of careful psychological preparation, triggering responses she had systematically programmed into her targets. The outsider lioness's sudden conversion wasn't miraculous inspiration. It was the result of extended psychological conditioning conducted through Kovu's gradual transformation. As he changed, he influenced others around him, spreading Prideland's ideology throughout the outsider community like a carefully introduced virus. Even Zira's final confrontation serves the operation's purposes. Her refusal to accept reconciliation and her ultimate self-destruction provided object lessons about the futility of continued resistance. Her elimination removed the last ideological authority capable of maintaining outsider identity, while her dramatic end ensured that resistance would be remembered as tragic rather than heroic. The cost of this success, however, is staggering. Kiara's relationship with Kovu can never be genuinely authentic because it was founded on systematic deception. Every moment of their romance was calculated, every gesture planned, every emotion performed for strategic advantage. The love that supposedly conquered hatred was itself a weapon of psychological warfare. Kovu's conversion, while genuine in its final form, was achieved through manipulation that violated every principle of autonomous choice. His new loyalty to the Pridelands isn't based on free decision, but on careful programming that exploited his psychological vulnerabilities. He believes he chose his new life, but that choice was manufactured through months of systematic influence. The broader implications are even more disturbing. If Simba could orchestrate such comprehensive psychological manipulation of enemy leadership, what other operations might be running within his own kingdom? How many apparently spontaneous developments in Prideland's politics are actually the result of royal intelligence operations? The techniques used against the outsiders could easily be deployed against internal dissent, rival kingdoms, or any group that challenges royal authority. The same psychological manipulation that converted Kovu could be used to control any lion whose loyalty becomes questionable. Most troubling is what this reveals about the nature of royal power itself. The Pridelands monarchy doesn't maintain control just through military superiority or economic dominance. It operates through sophisticated information warfare that makes opposition seem not just futile but psychologically impossible. The circle of life philosophy, viewed in this context, becomes less spiritual wisdom and more political programming. Its emphasis on acceptance, hierarchy, and predetermined roles serves to legitimize royal authority while discouraging resistance. The idea that everyone has their place and challenging that place disrupts natural order becomes a powerful tool for maintaining political control. This reframes every aspect of Prideland society. The apparent harmony between different species isn't natural cooperation. It's the result of systematic conditioning that makes alternatives to royal rule literally unthinkable. The loyalty of royal subjects isn't earned through benevolent leadership. It's manufactured through psychological operations that make rebellion emotionally impossible. The most unsettling question is whether Simba learned these techniques from his predecessors or developed them independently. If royal intelligence operations are a long-standing tradition, then everything we think we know about Prideland's history becomes suspect. How many apparently legitimate successions were actually the result of psychological manipulation? How many enemies were defeated through conversion rather than conflict? And if these capabilities exist within the Pridelands monarchy, what does that mean for the future? Kovu and Kiara's children will inherit not just royal authority, but the most sophisticated psychological warfare capabilities in Africa. Their ability to shape minds, control narratives, and manufacture consent will be virtually unlimited. The love story that supposedly proved the power of understanding over hatred actually demonstrates something far more sinister: the ability of political power to corrupt even the most intimate human connections in service of state control. What appeared to be triumph of emotion over ideology was actually the ultimate victory of ideology, using emotion as its weapon. Perhaps the most disturbing realization is that if this theory is correct, then we've been watching the wrong story entirely. The Lion King 2 isn't a tale of love conquering hatred. It's a masterclass in political manipulation disguised as romantic comedy. The happy ending isn't justice prevailing, it's successful psychological warfare being celebrated as moral victory. And if Simba could orchestrate something this comprehensive, this sophisticated, this thoroughly convincing, what other operations might be running right now, hidden behind facades of natural development and spontaneous change? The next time you watch young lions falling in love across enemy lines, ask yourself, is this genuine emotion or just another intelligence operation in progress?